Last year, around this time, I was on sabbatical, and we had a visitor who came as the bequest of Kate and Joe Bishop to check out Kensington Community Church while she was visiting from Thailand. And she got a chance to meet Reverend David Pitt and meet a number of you as well. And she shared with some of you some of the work that she was doing over in Southeast Asia. And she got connected up with the Ministry for Mission and Outreach. And we just thought that this was a wonderful Sunday when we are talking about the call story to Saul, that Saul was working and walking one path, and then after a moment of inspiration, of seeing, quote unquote, the light, changed paths and went down a completely different road of peace and love and compassion and mercy. And so we invited Heather to come and share with you a little bit about a non-government organization, an NGO called Jojo Sanctuary, which works for children and families in Thailand. Originally, we offered to ask Heather to do like a 3 to 4 minute mission moment. But the more I read about Jojo Sanctuary online, the more that Kate told me about the work that Heather was doing, I was like, oh, we got to give you the entire sermon. So that you can really share with us the work that you are doing, and so that we can be inspired to maybe work alongside of you. So we are so thankful and so happy that you are here with us this morning, Heather. And so if you would please welcome Heather Askew to our sanctuary and to our lectern, and to hear the story of Jojo Sanctuary.
Thank you, guys. Good morning. It's nice to be here. Thanks for having me. And thanks to Kate and Joe for bringing me. A little of my personal history. I grew up in Washington State, but I worked in Los Angeles as a script supervisor in film and TV for about 10 years. I ended up going over to Thailand on a mission trip with my church and just fell in love with the place and ended up moving there about 8 years ago to work in anti-trafficking organizations. So I started out doing an after-school program with kids in the slums. And then ended up going and working with children and youth who had actually been victims of trafficking. And in that work, sort of saw kind of some of the gaps in service that weren't being provided for. So some of my Thai colleagues and I decided to start our own organization to address those issues. And we decided to call it Jojo Sanctuary. So I'll give you guys a little bit of info about what we do. Our goal is to educate, protect, and empower children, families, and communities in vulnerable areas of Thailand. So we try to combat trafficking by helping children stay in their families and providing their families with tools to prevent abuse and exploitation of their children in their community. So I know I was following the news, and recently in America there was like a government shutdown here, and I read that 80% of people in America are like one paycheck away from homelessness. So for a moment, I'd like you to think about, if your family was in that situation, what would you want your children to, what would you want to happen to your children? Like, would you want them to stay with you despite the fact that you had no money? Would you want them to live with family members or maybe friends, or even go into foster care? Or would you rather have them go into an orphanage with a lot of other kids and few staff members? So for us as Americans, most of us would never pick orphanage as our first choice, but in other countries that seems to be the first choice for a lot of children to be placed in those situations. And when I moved to Thailand, like, my assumption was, as probably many of you think the same way, that there's just like not enough families for kids, and so that's why we have orphanages. But actually, I recently attended a seminar about this new foster care system that's emerging in Thailand, and I learned a lot of new facts about Thailand. So we learned about these statistics, but the one that really stuck with me was that Thailand has almost 90,000 children in orphanages or children's homes, but actually 90% of those kids have at least one parent alive who could take care of them, but they just are too poor. So the number one reason kids are in orphanages is poverty, and not actually because they don't have parents. Of those 90,000 kids, more than half of them are living in unregistered private children's homes. So that means more than 50% of those kids have no government oversight, which leaves them even more vulnerable to trafficking and abuse and exploitation than if they had just stayed in their own family. So we were like, oh man, this is an area we really can address and work with families who are at risk of having their families separate. The reason we named our organization Jojo Sanctuary is in honor of my friend's nephew, Jojo. So we're definitely aware that abuse and exploitation can happen within families of origin as well. And Jojo is an example of that. Sadly, he died as a result of child abuse. He's the nephew of a friend of mine, some friends of mine who live in Thailand as missionaries from Laos. So he was living with an aunt in Laos, and she was abusing him, and no one knew about it until it was too late and he died. And it was so tragic, and it happened at the same time as my friends and I were starting to create JoJo Sanctuary. So we thought, okay, we want to try and prevent other kids from having this same story by providing their parents with skills and support to allow every child to live in safety no matter what their financial situation is. So this is why we do a family strengthening program called Building Family Dreams, and that helps kids stay in their families and communities. So I want to share with you guys like a video of one of the families that's been in our Building Family Dreams program for a year. If you can hit the play button back there.
สวัสดีค่ะแม่อยากจะขอบคุณทีมงานของคุณวิเทอร์และทุกๆคนที่ทำงานด้วยกันครอบครัวของฉันก็ทีมงานของคุณวิเทอร์มาช่วยเหลือให้มีอาชีพเสริมกิจการเลี้ยงหมูเป็นอาชีพเสริมเมื่อก่อนพ่อกับแม่ถึงกับว่าเอาลูกไปฝากมูลนิธิพอทีมงานของคุณเตอร์มาช่วยก็ครอบครัวก็ดีขึ้นแล้วลูกๆก็ไม่ต้องอยู่มูลนิธิลูกๆกับครอบครัวก็ได้อยู่ด้วยกันอย่างมีความสุขแล้วก็ไม่ขาดแคลนเมื่อก่อนขออธิษฐานต่อพระเจ้าให้ครอบครัวของเราและก็ทีมงานของครูไฮเทอร์ก้าวต่อไปขอบคุณค่ะ
สวัสดีครับที่เขามาช่วยเหลือดีมากครับแต่เราพูดอะไรไม่ค่อยได้เจ็บพูดไม่ค่อยออก
ดีใจแล้วก็ภูมิใจน้ำตาคลอ
สวัสดีครับขอขอบคุณสำหรับจักรยานที่ซื้อให้ผมตอนนี้ผมได้มีจักรยานปั่นจักรยานครับ
So that's just a story of one family in our program. As I mentioned before, our goals are to educate, protect, and empower. And so we work in a variety of areas to achieve these goals. So for education, we not only offer scholarships to students who need money to buy uniforms. A lot of families get separated because the kids get older and they get into middle school, and it costs about $100 per child to buy uniforms. So the parents think, well, I don't have enough money to pay for that. So the options are either send the kid to an orphanage where they pay for this education, or the kids don't go to school. So it's a pretty impossible situation. So we think that should never be a reason for families to separate. So we do scholarships for uniforms. And we also provide a lot of training for organizations that work with children, people who work in children's homes and orphanages. And we provide training about positive parenting techniques for families who live in more rural areas. We also, a big focus of ours is working on citizenship. So I'll give you a quick story about why citizenship is so important. So think for a moment about your own families. Maybe you had a parent or a grandparent who was born in a foreign country. So if you're in Thailand, that automatically makes you not a citizen, because your parents' or grandparents' countries will not give you citizenship because you weren't born there. And because your parents or grandparents weren't born in Thailand, oftentimes that means you can't get citizenship in Thailand. But laws are slowly changing, and because we think it's really important and it's actually like, a human right to have citizenship in the country you were born in, we help families who are actually eligible to get citizenship go through this process. So like one family we worked with, they have 6 kids. So imagine you're born in a mountain village and you don't have a lot of access to education, but your parents have moved from Burma, and then the government sends a group to do a census in your village. So they take down everyone's names, and they give you a piece of paper. They say, okay, great, in 10 years you guys are going to get citizenship. You'll be Thai citizens. Awesome. So 10 years go by, you get your card. You're like, okay, great, now I have citizenship, but it doesn't really affect your life because you're still living in the village and farming rice and stuff. Well, no one tells you, okay, now that you have this, when you have kids, this is the process to do. You need to take them to the hospital and get a piece of paper and a birth certificate that says they were born in this country. So most people who are in this situation, they live like a day's walk from a hospital, or they live like 2 hours down a bumpy dirt road, and they only have a motorbike for transportation. So it's not very likely they're going to end up giving birth at a hospital. So they give birth at home, and then they have 10 days to register the birth at a hospital, which costs $10. And most of these families are making about $5 to $7 a day, so that's more than a day's wages. And so if no one even tells you how to do this, then it's like, how would you ever even know where to go? So then, of course, the kids get to school age. Now there's a school in the village, and so they take the kids to register for school, and the school's like, okay, well, we need your paperwork, your birth certificate, all that stuff. And the parents are like, what? So then they finally figure out, oh, okay, like now we have to go to the government office and get this paperwork for the kid. Well, the government's like, we have no proof this child was born in Thailand. He's 5 years old, 6 years old. So you get a card that says you can study till ninth grade, but that's pretty much all you get. But actually, the kids are eligible for citizenship because their parents now have the card. They just didn't know how to use it. So what we do is we come in and like find families like that, and we help them go through this process of getting their paperwork together, going to the government office and interviewing. So one family that we work with has 6 kids. They had 3 kids, then they got their citizenship card, and then they had 3 more. So the 3 kids born after they have citizenship actually were born in the hospital, so they don't have any problems. The first 3 have problems because the mom doesn't know how to go through the process to prove that she's now a citizen. So she goes to the village chief and she says, help me with this situation, please. I want my kids to have citizenship. And he's like, sure, $250 per kid and I'll help you. And keep in mind, she's now got 6 kids, and she's making about $8 a day on average. So she's thinking, I have 3 kids, and now I'm going to have to spend $750 to get them citizenship. And so she's like, sorry, I guess you just don't get citizenship. And that just means you can't travel outside your state, you can't go to school past 9th grade, you can't ever own property, you can't have health insurance, you can't get a job that pays more than $10 an hour. So it's a really huge issue. So we came in and we said, no, don't pay this guy. This is ridiculous. It's free. It's a free process. So we took the family to the government and went through the whole process, showed them the mom's paperwork, and they were like, yep, you're good to go. You just need a couple people from the village to come down who are relatives and say, yes, like we verified that this is actually our relative and they were born in this country. And also you need the village chief to come. We thought, oh no, this is terrible. The village chief is going to still charge us. But luckily, the people who work at the government office kind of brainstormed and said, like, okay, this is what we need to tell the village chief. So then my teammate, who is Thai, called the village chief up and gave him a whole, talked to him for about 20 minutes and said, you got to think about the future of these kids and, what it's going to mean for them. Finally, she convinced him to agree to come down and sign the papers. So next week, all 3 of those kids are going to get their citizenship. So that's a pretty amazing thing. Now their whole future will change, and all of their children's future will change. So this is why we really focus a lot on citizenship in our organization. And we work with the government in Thailand to help create and develop their foster care program. Right now, they mostly have long-term foster care for kids. They are working slowly to get all the kids into either back with their families, because as I mentioned, 90% of those kids have families. So they're trying to get the kids reintegrated into their families, but kids who actually are orphans, they're trying to find long-term families for those kids. But what we noticed when we were working at our after-school program is a lot of kids in poverty have a single-parent family who often doesn't have citizenship, and they end up going to jail for petty crimes for trying to feed their children. So there's separation in a month or 2, or there's families with domestic violence, and the parents are splitting up. The mom's trying to find a safe place for the kids, and she doesn't know where a place to put the kids while she's looking for a safe home and a new job. And so these kids just need short-term temporary care. So my teammates are a married couple, and so they have opened their home to be emergency emergency care for kids in that situation. Because the other alternative is either they go into the orphanage or they stay in an emergency shelter for a month, and then in the emergency shelter they're not going to school, they have no programming, they basically just sit around and watch TV all day. And so we're like, that's not great. So as an alternative to that, we're helping them find other families who will provide the emergency care and get them registered with the government as well. So this is a developing thing that we're still working on. And as I mentioned, our empowerment program, of course, you saw the family before. A little bit more background about them is when we met with that family, they were really impoverished. They had both the kids in the orphanage. Their house was pretty much falling apart. They were making, like, each of them was making between $5, $7 a day. And they just were like, we don't know what to do. And so we said, well, what would you, we have an economic strengthening portion of our program, and where each family gets allotted $500 to do kind of a micro business in their community. So we work with each family and say, what is it that you feel your skill set is? What do you want to do? So that family said, oh, we really loved raising pigs when we were growing up. Like, we'd like to raise pigs on our little plot of land. We said, great. So we went and bought them all the supplies to build a pig pen, bought a few baby pigs and some baby pig food and all that stuff. We spent about $60 per baby pig, and 4 months later, they sold the pigs, the adult pigs, for $300 each. And so that's amazing, because now they can, you know, improve their house. They have enough money to feed their kids. They can buy more pigs, invest in more pigs, and just continue raising those. And that's just going to be cyclical. They'll be able to save money in the bank and pay for the kids' school. And so they've gone within 1 year of being in our program from not having any idea how they would be able to feed their kids if they were living at home, to now being able to actually put money in the bank and save for their kids' future. So we're really excited about that. And of course, that's just one out of many stories that I could share with you. But so you can see, like, the stuff that we do, it really doesn't matter if you have $5 to donate or $5,000 to donate, because every single thing will help kids who are working or who live in Thailand. So $5 pays for lunch for a week for a child in school. $5,000 is what we allot for each round of our economic empowerment program. So that would pay for a full course of the Building Family Dreams program. So obviously we're always looking for donations, and especially for monthly supporters. If you want to follow us on social media, we have a new intern, which is very exciting, social media intern. So we have content on our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages. You can always look at our website. We have lots of stories and pictures on our website about all the different programs that we do. We try to update that about once a month. And then we do a longer newsletter every other month to keep all of our prayer partners and financial supporters in the loop about what's happening on the ground. So that's a little bit more detailed. If you'd like to be on that list, just see me afterwards and I'll add your email to the list. And as part of our economic empowerment program, in the current round that we're in, we had a bunch of ladies in the village kind of form a little sewing co-op. They each got sewing machines, and so they've been making bags and tie comfy elephant pants and keychains, that sort of stuff. So I brought some samples of all of those for fundraising. We've got those set up in the social hall, so if you want to come take a look at that afterwards, I'd love to talk more to you about that. If you'd like to become a monthly financial partner, that would be awesome too, and I can tell you how to do that. And obviously your prayers are always welcome, because it's can be very stressful. We're making a lot of decisions all the time, and what's best for the kids, what's best for the family. So prayers are definitely important. We appreciate it if you guys leave us in your prayers. Oh, and real quick about my dress. So the community we work with is a Lahu tribal community, and this is like their traditional dress. So one of the women in the sewing program actually made this for me. I came one day to just do a quick home visit, and she pulled out her tape measure and was like measuring my shoulders and my legs, and I was like, what's happening here? And she's like, I'm making you a dress. And I was like, okay. And like a month later, she was like, here you go, here's your Christmas present, you can wear it at our Christmas party. I was like, wow, this is amazing. So so in case you were wondering, that's where that came from. But thank you very much for letting me come and share, and I hope to see you guys again next time I'm in town.
Yay! So good. Thank you so much. At the 8:30 service, after Heather shared her story and the story of Jojo Sanctuary, one of our members made the comment that it's incredibly inspirational to know that one or two people can make a tremendous difference in the lives of others. And so today, as we hear so much about what Heather's doing and Jojo Sanctuary is doing, I hope that you are inspired to either get involved somewhere in your backyard or get involved by donating for an NGO and such an inspirational opportunity halfway around the world. There is such a horrible narrative in our country that it's all falling apart. And so let me just present to you an alternative, true narrative, and so that you can put behind that false narrative. Yes, there are things in the world that are tough, but there are people who are working through God's providence and work and grace and compassion to make the world a better place. And I think that slowly but surely we put those things on top of each other, and the world and to use Karen's analogy earlier, we push the stone away and we allow the love and the compassion and the mercy and the kindness to enter into the world. So thank you, Heather, for everything that you are doing. Thank you, all of you, for all the work that you do to make the world a better place. We are inspired by the story of individual people, as well as inspired by rituals that remind us that we are not alone, that the power of God's love and compassion and grace is in the world. We come to be reminded of that and to be lifted up and inspired to go back out into the world to be agents of love and compassion and mercy and kindness.